His name is Abed Tau. He's a Limpopo born. He is an entrepreneur that has really walked the entrepreneurial road many times. He started so many businesses. Some of them have been successful, others have not. And I think the purpose for today's session is for you to learn. It's for you to know that so many businesses start, some fail, some become a success. But what's important, it's for you to take the lessons that you can and apply it in your business. He knows what it's like and what it takes to be an entrepreneur. He's a director of Tamani Financial Services, where they're consulting, focusing primarily on the SMME environment. He has also co-founded two tech businesses called TutorMe, which is TutorMe, but it's written in the best way that we can all understand. He has also co-founded another business, which is also in the tech space, which is called Silicon Maboneng. Years later, he has written a book, which I believe, and I would like to believe that it was informed by his quest to share the journey that he has walked over the years in starting all these businesses I've just told you about. But he's a better storyteller than me. I will not waste any time. I'll let him introduce himself, who he is, what he does, and just take you through the journey. Nolu will also later on just introduce the rules of engagement for this webinar. Over to you, Nolu, before we can give it to Abed. Nolu? Okay. Nolu? Okay, Nolu, I don't know what's going on. She must have walked away. So basically, guys, Abed will do the introduction, we'll do sessions, but please, we want to make the session as interactive as possible. Whenever you have question, you can just simply maybe turn into video mode and just raise your hand so that we can give you the platform to ask whatever question you may have. With that said, Abed, you can introduce yourself. And welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been quite a journey for, I think, everyone in the past 2-3 months, just figuring out, what the new normal is going to look like. So we certainly, from our business perspective, have also just been doing hundreds of these Zoom calls, just trying to figure out what does business look like for the next couple of months, probably years. But when I was asked to do this talk, I thought there's so many things that I could talk about, and given the time, I thought what might be okay is to actually just talk through a slide deck that I've prepared for this, and take it from there. There are a few chapters in the book that I want to talk to because they talk.
I think that problem we spoke about earlier. Please, guys, if you have joined us, please put yourself on mute so that we cannot see or hear what you're doing in the background. Sorry for that.
That's absolutely fine. So I'm going to project a slideshow because it'll really just depict what it is that we do. I was told that this is a safe environment, so I'm going to share freely and authentically. And the information that I am sharing, whilst some of it is sensitive, I'm happy to share it to sort of help you guys and think about your businesses. So I'm just going to share for a second. Everyone can see, eh?
I can see on my side. Can people confirm if they can see?
Fine.
Yeah, I can see.
Okay, so I guess the start would be the businesses that you have described. So primarily we do the following 3 businesses, which I'll unpack in a second, but the story really starts in 2014, 26 February, when I was turning 26, so it was my crown birthday, and I had always been fascinated with the this animal called entrepreneurship. And, throughout my varsity career, I'd done a number of different businesses, some with epic failure and some with mild success. But I've always been fascinated by entrepreneurship. I don't come from a family of means at all. My dad was a single parent because my mom passed away when I was about to start grade 8, and for the most part, my dad had to really make incredible sacrifices for us to even just go to school. We all had to have to make a way in terms of how to pay for our own varsities and stuff. And the 7 kids in the family, and I'm the second youngest. So throughout my varsity career, as I said, I've just always been interested in entrepreneurship, and I don't remember a single year since I was 17 that I hadn't done some form of a business or involved in some venture. So I'm just truly a disciplined student to entrepreneurship. And I think the disclaimer here is that I'm certainly not a business guru. I'm still learning myself. I'm 32 years old, so the business is run by 5 directors, which I'll go through, and we're a young team. I'm the oldest at 32. Everyone's sort of 32, 30, and Dylan being the youngest, who's 29 this year. But back to 2014, I had just qualified as a chartered accountant, did my articles at Deloitte, and had lived overseas for a year 8 months after I just qualified, between New York State, Boston, and Philadelphia. And I sort of came back and worked a bit in learning at Deloitte, and decided that I want to go pursue entrepreneurship, as it may be. My logic at the time was that, I'm young enough to take the risk, even though, my family relied heavily on my income. My logic was that, if it worked out, it will work out better for all of us if I took the sacrifice. So my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, she had been working at Deloitte in the tax division. She holds a master's in tax. I sort of asked her not to quit her job because someone needed to pay for my petrol and food. But without my knowledge, she resigned a day after I did. And she didn't tell me this until, my last day, when I thought, okay, at least I've got someone who will support me. But she surprised me to say, well, she's decided that she's joining me on this crazy adventure. So we started a business called Tamani, and this slide essentially tries to describe the journey that the businesses have gone through. So I'm going to first talk about Tamani because there's quite a lot of, interwebbedness here, where there's a lot of companies that started at the same time. But in 2014, Tebs and I resigned to start what is today Tamani, which looks at advisory services, assurance, and tax and accounting. We really didn't know what we wanted to do, to be honest with you, when we left. We just were fascinated with the idea of starting something from scratch. We both were still living at home at the time, and very difficult circumstances. However, we really were wanting to really do this. I think 6 months after we had started, we had left our jobs. We had ran completely out of money, and we had cashed out our pensions at Deloitte, which weren't big cash. I think we probably had about 120,000 to split between us for, and that's all the money we had. And I had convinced Tebs to give me half of the money to buy into a bar with friends in Soweto, and that completely went to shit within 6 months. So we literally had no income, and within 6 months we had already started considering going back to formal employment because we were really at the back of our bones. However, the only thing that seemingly was making a little bit of traction was this accounting business, because friends of ours and people that we knew and kept meeting knew that I was a CA, and Tebs had her master's in tax and was a tax professional. So people kept asking us to do these random tax and accounting jobs. And, I said to Tebs within 2, 3, 4 months after we had left that maybe we should just focus on this for now, and we will go back to our dream of, being these industrialists and owning a lot of businesses one day, but maybe we just anchor ourselves in this accounting space. So we carried on doing that. In 2015, it was still just Tebs and I. And then in 2016, what was happening at the time is that I had started this business called Tutor Me with Dylan. In fact, the business Tutor Me started in 2015 when we started building out the technology. It got to a point where in 2016, we then launched Tutor Me. We ended up winning a competition or coming second in a competition called Hack Josie that we saw ourselves win 350,000 Rand as runner-up prize. Dylan quit his job. He thought we were rich. And we now were going to focus on this. But what was happening is that Tamani in itself was starting to get a bit of traction, and Tebs really still needed me. And I was now really pulling away to this exciting new technology business that I'd founded with Dylan. And we got to a point where we realized we potentially need help in Tamani to start handling some of the growth we're experiencing. And that's when Tuto joined us. So Tuto is a director in Tamani. And we started Tamani Advisory as a separate business when he joined, which does separate things. And then 2017, we carried on just the three of us. And then at the beginning of 2018, Nathan joined to form Tamani Assurance. And today, I'd like to think we run a professional services firm with a full suite of financial services. Along the line here, Dylan and I carried on doing Tutor Me, and we also founded Silicon Maboneng, which is essentially a dev house. So we've built a lot of systems and apps for businesses and continue to do that today. So just faces. I quickly had to add Dill because I ran out of time while making this in the past hour. That's me. So that's Tuto, who joined us in the middle of 2016. That's Dylan. This is my wife, Tebs, who looks after Tamani Consulting, and that is Nathan, who looks after Tamani Assurance. Just some of the so maybe let me preface by saying that, across these four businesses, these three businesses last year, I think our revenue last year, December, was just a little above 40 million through the three of them, and quite a large portion, well, at least half of the revenue came from Tamani. So you'll see that in the first year that we started, in 2014, when Tebs and I quit our job, we did about 380,000 Rand in revenue, which was actually really tight because a lot of that money actually didn't belong to us. So in fact, it was really, really, really bad at some point. I had to go do a 3-month secondment overseas just to try pay off my car so that it doesn't get repossessed. And unfortunately at the time I had to leave Tebs to fend for herself for Tamani. And I think there was quite a break. There's an interesting story there that, when things were really bad and I was overseas doing this 3-month secondment to try and make a bit of cash during our small stint, things were so bad that I remember on a phone call with Tebs, she was just telling me that things are terrible. We had 3-4 clients at the time on retainer, and we were earning like maybe 12 grand on retainers. We had an employee that we could barely afford. We were paying that employee like 3,500 Rand. Tebs was drawing a salary of 4 grand. And I remember saying to Tebs, because now I was overseas, and I was like, look, I've got this secondment. Why don't we just stop? We've had fun. Why don't we stop doing that? Why don't you come join me overseas? I still have this place for 3 months, like that Deloitte had paid for, and we'll come back and figure out what to do. And thank goodness Tebs talked me out of that, and she persevered, because we wouldn't have carried on. So if Tebs had decided at that moment that, what, screw it, I'm done, I'm coming overseas just to spend 3 months to recuperate, we wouldn't have done anything that we've done. So credit to her for sticking it through when it was extremely difficult. At the end of year 2, we did about 1.4, 1.5 million. this is the profitability line. So at the end of year 3, when Tutor joined, we did 3.8 million. And in 2017, we did about 9.2 million. 2018, we did 16.5. And last year in Tamani, we did about 23. And we're still growing. I think by the time February had hit, we'd already done 20 million. So we potentially will, the other 17 million rand that made the 40 odd million last year of Tutor Me and Silicon sort of growing. Okay, so this is just some of the little stuff that we did last year. These are essentially some of the businesses that we own. So just to give everyone just a high level again, so Silicon is the business that Dylan and I own. We also own, we started investing in different businesses that are not all here. So we own 50% of a bakery that supplies to all the Seattle coffees and the slow lounges at the airports and a lot of your coffee shops that you love going to. Heavily impacted by COVID, but luckily we reopened 2 weeks ago, which is great. We also own some technology businesses called ourvenue.com and some others that we've recently just acquired. We've got a venture capital fund where a lot of the profits we make, we sort of sit in here and invest in other businesses. And we've also got a property division. So this is just the non-core stuff that we do. I can talk a little about our culture as well. Just some of the things that we think about when we hire, or the environment that we try to foster in the company. So when we hire people, we sort of tell them that they're hired not by accident. They don't need to prove themselves, because one of the things that I do when I hire people is my decision is not based on someone's CV, because we believe that you can teach skills and you can teach for competence, but what you can't teach for is attitude, and you can't teach for is a culture fit. So I almost have to see an ability for that person that we're hiring to be at my house having dinner or having a braai with any of our mates, because for us, we really try build a family structure in terms of hiring. We don't know how scalable that will be when we get to 200, 300 employees, but we do have quite a number of employees currently, around 70 across the different things that we do. Sorry, something I didn't mention here. So towards the end of the year, last year, we actually sold our Tutor Me business, or education business. I didn't talk about this. So Tutor Me started out, sorry, I'm going all over the show, but I'll try bring it all together. So Tutor Me, Dylan and I, as I said, started in 2015. We started it as the Uber for tutors. So, we sort of said parents and learners can go onto the app and find a subject that they're struggling with, whether it be at varsity or in high school. And we would then obviously back end that with tutors, and we would be the connection point. And we started out being consumer facing, and we took quite a hiding in terms of being consumer led, and we had to pivot into a B2B model where we started doing business with other businesses. Essentially, we'd go to companies like Deloitte, PwC, or ETV, or Honeywell, and say to them that, they pay so much money in terms of giving learners bursaries, but what are they doing in terms of giving these learners academic support? And we wanted to back end their bursary with almost a tutoring bursary, and that started taking off. So we today have clients like Investec, Anglo, Nedbank, there's quite a number, Vodacom, Deloitte, the accounting firms, law firms. And we essentially sell education services to them, and we also built more education products that we retail to other companies. As I said, we sold that at the end of 2019 to the PSG Group, and in fact, Dylan and I have got one more month in terms of just our handover responsibility, so we'll be fully done at the end of June. But yeah, back to our culture. as I said, for me, from a hiring perspective, we really think it's so important to build the right culture when you are building an organization, because when you're an entrepreneur, what you essentially want is you want diversity in where people come from, you want diversity in even race, you want diversity in people's backgrounds, because all of that richly gives a good cement in terms of your business, because you want different thinking, you want to build a brain's trust around your business, because all you are doing is solving problems the whole time. But what you don't want is a diversity in culture. You want people that will champion the mission. If your mission is that you are going to put education in everyone's hand in South Africa, you don't want people whose mission is to be a millionaire. Like that, there's a mission, there's a culture disalignment there. So for us, it was so important that we try and make sure that our first hires are so we take those decisions seriously, even though it was difficult because we couldn't afford. There's always this conundrum when you're hiring as a startup, because you can't afford, the market prices that the banks and the companies are competing with, but you want the best people. So it's always this, quid pro quo of how do you do that. But for us, it was just so important because we believe that our first hires or initial hires essentially become the DNA of your business. They are the ones that you want to replicate, So we work together, and nobody's going to hold your hand. So we want people that take initiative. We want to pay you to make mistakes. We want people to basically be thought leaders within our own business. We don't believe as founders and directors have all the answers. So we want people to challenge us, to take initiative. But we also believe in collaboration. There are no heroes at our business. We following that, this is just some of the guys that were able to attend this function we did, I think last year, December. We're not big on hierarchy at all. A lot of the employees that we employ are our age. So, if you walked into our office, you wouldn't know, who the bosses are or whatever, because we haven't built our business like that. We really just have this big open plan where everyone sits wherever and there's just no boss. We also do emphasize the need for play. We work hard, but we really do enjoy, the space that we've built in our office. We socialize a lot, and we also celebrate each other. I can't overemphasize how important it is to celebrate, each other. We've got I'll talk about it when I discuss some of the chapters I want to discuss in my book about our obsession with sales. But we've got the sales board that we've set up at our office, and it's got all these sort of different stars, and each star has a different, value in terms of what the sale value is. And we've got a very strict criteria of what a sale is. Is the money in the bank? Do you have a POP? Is there a signed defensible contract? Is the debit order signed? We don't believe an invoice particularly is a sale. So, we've got our favorite movie at the office is, The Wolf of Wall Street, not because we, glorify Jordan Belfort for anything, but we just love the obsession with sales. And, we've got this big poster of Leonardo DiCaprio looking at the sales board, and we've got this big bell there that every time anyone makes a sale, they're entitled to ring the bell. And that's just changed our culture so much. We introduced the sales bell 2 years ago when I got to a point where I felt that the sales were stagnating, and I wanted to create a culture of reminding us as entrepreneurs at the office that, sales cures everything. Like, we, as I said, we have such an obsession with sales, but I'll get to that. And obviously, super important is that we really believe that our clients are our partners and our team members. These guys are paying us an incredible amount of money to solve a lot of their complex problems, and we want them to feel that their problems are just as important to us in terms of solving those. We do really believe in a work smart, not harder mentality. So, one of the things we were very lucky about is that Dylan is an incredible technology enthusiast. So we had already probably 2 years ago started using all these platforms for work collaboration and Slacks and the Trellos and the Zooms and the WebExes and the Teams. So for us, working remotely has almost become so easy to do because we're already, in a sense, so digitized in terms of how we do our work, even in the accounting and all of the other spaces and even the tutomies. And we work together. So that's essentially the small slideshow just to paint a picture of, what we've been able to do over the past couple of years and the businesses that sort of fall in place and who's who and, when did we build the stuff. Before I go into some of the stuff that I want to chat about in the book and allow for questions, one of the things that I've learned is that we've grown year on year. So every year we've almost doubled our growth at 100% and more, in some years bigger. We've seen that the key growth driver in our organization has been adding the right partners into the business. So if you just look at these circles, they represent growth, right? So this was 2014, Tevs and I started growing, but the exponentiality of the growth happened when we started adding really good people that are aligned with us in terms of their entrepreneurial thinking, their vision, and where we want to take the company, as well as Dylan also being part of this. So for us, we've literally grown because we've trusted more people. So Tevs and I could have carried on just doing this by ourselves, but I don't think we would have achieved some of the small success that we had today. And it just talks to the importance of finding the right co-founder and people that share your vision. And it's not the easiest task in the world, but we've been just so incredibly lucky. And I feel so privileged that I work with such incredibly smart people. They say, we're the sum of the 4 people that we spend most of our time with. And I can tell you that I'm challenged every single day with these guys because they just keep me on my toes all the time. I'm going to share another screen, so I'm end sharing for a second. And I just want to encourage you guys, if you do have questions, I think what you should do is just start typing your questions in the conversation, and at the end we'll try to get to as many as we can, because I don't want this to just be me talking. But let's go to this. Okay, everyone should be able to see this. So this is an extract of, well, this is the book, not an extract, but this is a PDF version. So there's so many chapters that I could talk about, all the time. Like my favorite chapter is this one here, boring is good, stay away from exciting, and I'll talk to that now. But I want to start talking about this first 100 days, right? So when Tebs and I quit our jobs in 2014, the first thing that we recognized that we needed to solve, before the fancy website, before the fancy business cards, before the fancy, company CI and all of that, we were like, we need to get customers. We need to get invoicing quickly. And we find that a lot of people have this obsession with making, doing everything first. Like we believe that the cart here, the horse here was the customer and the cart was the operation. So since day one, we've just been so customer centric. So in our first 100 days, in this chapter, I specifically talk about, when you think of a president that's just been elected, their first 100 days are typically seen by the country as instrumental. What are the reforms he's going to do, and what are the areas he wants to change the GDP, and where is biggest impact going to be felt? So for us, we felt that in our first 100 days, we wanted to meet as many people as we could that could potentially become customers. So in the first 100 days, Tibbs and I must have collected over 400 business cards. And this was through lunches, through, cold calls, through just calling that uncle to say, don't you know anyone who needs accounting? So we did, hundreds of this stuff. Like and a very expensive habit, because often when you're taking a prospective client to lunch, they are ordering the crayfish and you're just ordering water. So, and you get stuck with the bill. But what I found is that those 400 people that we potentially, I mean, and it's not hard to get to 400. I mean, if you think about two people and you sort of just say, okay, cool, we need to meet a person a day each. In a month, that's already 60 people. And I'm talking Saturday, Sunday. I'm not talking about Monday to Friday. I think entrepreneurship is a full-time job, and I mean Monday to Sunday. So if you just did that, that's already 60 people within 3 months. That's already 180 potential customers. Some businesses don't need more than 10 customers. I think a lot of us entrepreneurs fail there to recognize that you literally just need to go see 2 people a day. If you're a co-founding team of 2 people, that's already 360 people per in this 100 days that could potentially become your customers. And it's not difficult to get an email address of a CEO. You can find it on LinkedIn. Our reason why we were so obsessed with sales is because, being accountants, one of the things that you learn is that you get to look at a lot of financial statements, right? So you get to look at a church's financial statements, you get to look at NPOs, right up to startups, right up to listed entities. And the common denominator across all businesses, NPOs, charities, was that all of their financial statements started with revenue. So every single one of these financial statements started with, what is the revenue? So essentially, have we solved for a customer here? Because everything else that follows after that is a consequence of a customer. So I often ask people, I'm like, who do you think the most important person is in an organization? And most people will go on to say, the CEO or the COO or the financial director. And I don't believe that at all. I think the most important person in a business is your best salesperson, because without them, there is no salary to pay that fancy CEO. There is no salary to pay the CFO. All who are important, but the most important person in the organization is the one that brings sales, in my opinion, anyways. So I'm going to move on from that in terms of the first 100 days, in terms of what we did. I want to emphasize this chapter that I wrote here. Boring is good. And I'm sorry if I'm rushing. It's just, I know we've got an hour. Because I could speak forever about entrepreneurship. I'm just so passionate about it. One of the things that I realized early on when Tebs and I were doing Tamani, and I think a large part of why it's been successful, or even the stuff that we did with Dylan, with Silicon, Tutor Me, and continue to do with the bakery and the businesses we have, is this concept of, boring is good, stay far away from exciting. So when Tebs and I left Deloitte, we left as chartered accountants and tax professionals. And when you typically think of a chartered accountant, I was on a call earlier with Nolu, and she was saying, chartered accountants that she knows have got these fancy jobs and they're in these fancy positions. And that's typically true. So a lot of my friends are merchant bankers. They are, group financial managers headed to one day becoming the group CFOs. But what we found in a very quick, short space of time was that no chartered accountant or someone who's going to go do a master's in tax wanted to do accounting for SMMEs. There was none. So, the most qualified people to do this job didn't want to do it. And what we then quickly found was that we found traction extremely quickly, because the people that were bookkeepers in the market weren't chartered accountants and tax practitioners. And we were quickly able to convert clients, because clients were kind of like, oh my word, I'm going to be able to get a CEA and a tax practitioner to be able to inform the decisions in my business. And we just got so much incredible traction. However, we were doing the boring stuff. We were doing the stuff that no one wanted to do. Tebs and I were driving to coffee shops to get their slips in boxes and plastics and come back to the office and collect it. And I can tell you, CAs did not want to and still don't want to do that. So it just became this important lesson that I thought about, to say, when people essentially think about entrepreneurship, they think about doing the most exciting things. And my assertion is that I've got these graphs that I want to share with you in this chapter. Sorry. So essentially, if you look here, oh no, Sorry, these graphs just help me explain this so much better. Okay, so I'll just look at this one for in terms of a boring business. So a boring business, my assertion is that if the more boring the business is, the higher your chances of success. So if you think about a chef that goes to, culinary school and they come out being able to do, a mixed seafood puree and, the food that looks amazing. Most of these guys, 99% of them, want to go open a restaurant. Like they want to be the David Higgs, they want to be Alex of Gemelli, and they want to earn a Michelin star one day, and nothing wrong with that. But however, restaurants in my mind are extremely exciting businesses. Like, Uber created a wave of exciting businesses, and we were victims of that as well in Tutor Me, because we fell for the exciting. Within a month of having started Tutor Me and launched it, we had 7 other competitors, people who were doing exactly the same thing as us, same technology. And this was the lesson for me that, the more boring your business is, firstly, you don't actually have a lot of competition because people don't want to do it. It's like today, if your toilet gets blocked, no one's really opening pipes there. You're calling a plumber. No one wants to do that. But I promise you, most plumbers earn more than all of us on this call, because no one wants to do that work. So we quickly found that the business models for us that make sense were doing things that no one wanted to do. Like in our accounting practice, no one wants to do bookkeeping. And later on, after we started getting traction, we started then obviously adding different service suites. But my assertion is that the more boring a business is, the higher the chances are. And I find that people who, even in South Africa, are millionaires and do well are in boring businesses again. So you're living, the higher the boring, the higher the chances of being a millionaire. So you are not going to find a millionaire plumber making the cover of Time, unfortunately. So there's certain things that you're going to have to live with, that if you're in a boring business, you're going to be a bit obscure. No one's going to know you. You're not going to be called to do a conference of 5,000 people to come listen to you. You're not going to be Travis Kalanick. However, you definitely will be well off, more than all the people that are trying exciting businesses. So, and again, if you think about competition, thinking about the things that I was talking about, if you're in a boring business, you're in a space that no one wants to do. So again, with the chef example, all the 99% of the culinary chefs that have just graduated want to go build these restaurants that go compete against each other. Now they're competing for our already tight economy in terms of consumer spend. But if those chefs went out and said, you know what, I'm going to go to office parks and serve, bacon and ham sandwiches, they would find amazing success, because every office needs a canteen. No one will ever know that you're the chef, and let's be frank, you're serving, toasted salmis. You're not making, stuff on a bed of mash or whatever master chef terms are. But you will be successful. You'll quickly gain traction. You will get to 5, 10, 15 corporates that essentially you start a canteen service. If you guys think of Tsebo, if you think of Bidvest and their canteens, and again, who owns that? No one does, but everyone knows Alex from Gemelli, right? And I can tell you that's an incredibly difficult business. Then I talk about exciting businesses. So again, the higher the excitement, the higher your chances of failure. And again, it's my contrarian view that if you are in a space that is exciting, you are not the only one that thinks it's exciting. 100 other people are going to try to do this. If you think about, just look at what's happened in the country in terms of masks, right? So, overnight, every single person is a PPE producer. You could have bought a face mask in March for 100 Rand and you would have paid it. But today, if you're paying over 20 Rand for a mask, you're getting ripped off because why? It's exciting, it's easy to do. Everyone with a bit of cloth and an elastic band is a mask maker. It's exciting. There's so many businesses that people do because it's the zikha, it's the spirit of the time. And I don't like those businesses. In fact, when we think of investing in businesses, our criteria is that we must fall asleep in your pitch. We must be so bored. And then you're doing a good thing. But if we have an inkling of, wow, that's amazing, we already are worried. I know it's contrarian. My assertion, this should actually just read exciting businesses. A successful person who runs an exciting business, if you're successful at it, you are able to build a good lifestyle business. So what do I mean? You'll be able to take your kid to a private school, you'll do a holiday a year, and you'll afford your lifestyle. And nothing wrong if that's what you want to do. But it's difficult. I think the more exciting, the more competitive, the more players, and so forth. The last business that I talk about, which I don't think is extremely easy, is a difficult business. Now, a difficult business, I'm talking about, Elon Musk difficult. So that you're in a difficult space if there's 2, 3, 5 of you doing this. If you think about space exploration, it's Elon, it's Jeff, and NASA, really, in America. It's just 3 people. High barriers to entry, high chances of failure. So the more difficult a business is, so again, I want to caveat this. All business is difficult, but I'm talking here like excruciating difficult, like intellectually difficult, high sums of capital needed. Very few people can do this sort of stuff. I don't think I've started a difficult business according to those matrices. So if the higher the difficulty, the higher the chances of failure, because let's face it, it's just extremely difficult. However, those that are able to make a difficult business work, these are essentially the billionaires of the world. So the 2,500 billionaires, at least 80% of these people have started excruciatingly difficult businesses. Like if you just think of Zara, so starting a clothing label is fine, but starting a global network of distribution of clothes and brand, and that's why he's number 4 or 5 in the world. So I'm talking about excruciatingly difficult businesses. And again, from a competitiveness, there's no competition. So in my mind, you should either be pursuing a difficult business or a boring business, because those two have the highest chances of success. And again, this talks to business models and who your customer is and those technicalities. There's 2 other things I want to talk about before I stop, because like I said, I could talk for hours about stuff that I spoke about. I want to talk about fundraising. So, yesterday I was on a call with a good friend of mine, Donald, who raised a significant amount of funding for his business called Zulzi, which is a grocery delivery app. When we were raising funding for Tutor Me, we went everywhere. We went to Cape Town, we looked in Stellenbosch, we looked in Joburg, we must have gone to 5 sort of places to look, and all of them were just extremely difficult because they didn't understand what it is that we're trying to do or the vision. Excuse me. And we eventually raised about 8 million Rand from different sources of funding. But I think this whole book is about that experience that we did in terms of raising funding and what that meant, because I think South Africa lives in a culture where we celebrate the ability to raise funding. And that largely stems from our influence from the West. So, every day you read a Silicon Valley a garage startup that has just been able to raise a massive round of funding. And for a large part of our journey, we used to think that being able to raise funding was a success matrix, and it couldn't be further from the truth. My solemn belief today is that the best type of funding you can raise out there is still a customer. If you're able to run a business that never needed funding, congratulations, you've done what most people dream of doing. And that's not to say that funding is not a limitation in terms of business. I think for me, if I was raising funding, or the funding that we give entrepreneurs is strictly growth capital, I want to see that you've got traction, and I want to see that the funding that you're getting is getting you from 100 customers to 1,000 customers. Not funding to say, I need to pay the rent or we need to keep salaries. I think that's a different type of funding. And as I said, I think we need to change the narrative of how we view funding. I think the best companies that are funded out there are funded by their customers, not by debt. And you get to keep a lot of equity if you don't do fundraising. And then the last thing, so that I allow for time, I want to talk about, during these times of COVID, I guess so many businesses are impacted, including our own. A lot of our revenues are down. And I want to talk about, giving up. Is there, there's a chapter here called, is there ever a good time to give up? I want to see what chapter that is.
It's chapter 10.
There we go. Is there a perfect time to give up? So I think within the first 18 months of Tebs and I doing our business, we were just at a low. Business was so slow, and we weren't really making any money. I mean, and you sometimes sit and think like, flip, my friends are doing so well. They're driving nice shiny cars, buying their apartments, and you have a human reaction to say, flip, maybe I should stop this nonsense. And this one particular night, I was in my apartment in Northgate. It was a 2-bedroom apartment, and I didn't have any furniture in the place. I had a fridge and a microwave and a blow-up mattress in the living room because I didn't need it in the bedroom because there was no bed. So I literally slept in the living room on this blow-up mattress, and I quite liked my blow-up mattress. It was comfortable to a degree. But on a particular night, 18, 20 months in, I woke up in the middle of the night hungry, and I heated up some food, and I took this plate to my couch / bed / living place, my blow-up mattress, and I accidentally at 1 o'clock in the morning put through a knife through the blow-up mattress. And sorry, my phone is just ringing. And the blow-up mattress, as you can imagine, started deflating, and air was rushing out, and it's an absolute disaster. I drove to garages at 2 in the morning, and I came back and just trying to find super glue and anything I could find just to keep the deflation from going through. And that didn't help. And that night I slept on the concrete. I want to pause here because I see my battery is low, and I just want to go get a charger. If you give me a second, please.
Okay, we are almost at 12:30. I think we'll just go over a bit that 12:30 mark. But if you guys have questions, you can start typing into that chat box. And
Sorry about that. Where was I? Yes, slept on the concrete, and I just remember that night thinking like, this is it. We've just got to give up. And I think I learned a lot through that lesson because, we obviously carried on. I think there's never a good time to give up. I think there are times where you're allowed to press the reset button and, attack the problem in a different way. And rejig your business model. So even in these times of COVID, you've got to be thinking about, what does the world look like in 12 months' time? What does the world look like in 15 months' time, in 5 years' time? And, how do we begin to start thinking about, positioning our businesses to address the needs of the future instead of giving up? So, Yeah, that's, I know I've said a lot in the past, 40 odd minutes, 50 odd minutes. I want to stop there so that I'll allow for any questions. Nolu, if you feel that's a good place to stop and if I've made some sense in my blabbering. Where can you purchase the book? So the book is available at all exclusive books. And also if you just go into Amazon and just search for Searching Through Dustbins or my name, Abed Tau, you can buy the ebook, the Kindle version. Yeah. Noli, do you want to direct questions? Nomfuneko?
Yes, I've already said. Okay, maybe just before. Okay, guys, if you have questions, you can always raise hands, or you can just quickly switch your camera, your video camera, so that we can see your hand, or you can just unmute yourself and ask a question. But just Abed, just to add on to the table of contents, obviously I always say this, I haven't read your book yet, but there are chapters that I think our entrepreneurs that are on the call now can maybe take some things out. And what stood out for me, it's 4, but you've just talked about chapter 10, which I thought it's actually a perfect chapter, especially during this time for some of the businesses that will think otherwise and maybe think of giving up their businesses now. But there's chapter 18. I just want you to elaborate on the importance of the things that you talk about in those chapters. Chapter 18, it says, listen, take genuine interest, and be authentic. I want you to just elaborate on that. And then chapter 21, the importance of staying hungry and staying foolish to keep going, and to, if you need to change the model of your business, the importance of having to shift through. And then the last chapter that for me stands out, especially during this time, the popcorn I regret giving up. If you can just maybe elaborate on those. But if you guys have questions, you can always just unmute and raise a question. We're talking, it's a conversation.
Sure. Okay. Sorry, you said the first one was chapter. Take interest, listen. Yeah. So that chapter essentially, I talk about the fact that what I learned, anyways, is that people do business with people they like. Excuse me. And that most of the time, we're in such a rush to sell a product. And I find that it's counterintuitive, but I really believe that I've never sold anything in my life. I've basically tried to solve people's problems. I think, if you approach life with a genuine interest in getting to know people, building rapport, really understanding their viewpoints, very quickly, people will firstly like you, and very quickly, people will tell you what their challenges are in their organizations, and you'll be able to find solutions. So for us, this translated even just with our own employees. Like, it is very important to me that I understand every single employee story, where they come from, what are they the breadwinner at their house? So I really want to get to know people, because I also view our employees as our biggest stakeholder. So, every single day you're selling, right? You're selling to your parents, you're selling to your partner, you're selling to your employees, you're selling to business. And the ability to sell for me comes from a genuine place of wanting to actually get to understand people and actually really try helping solve their problems. And that chapter really encapsulates that in a way. The stay hungry, stay foolish one really is just about grit, and just sticking the journey. I talk a lot about my business partner Tuto there and his journey, and how he joined us and he's had to take no salary, and it's just how incredibly difficult it was, but it was encouraging to see him stay the path. And I guess the foolishness is entrepreneurship actually is a very counterintuitive profession. Everything says don't do it. Like, why would you leave a good job to go and potentially flirt with poverty? So everything is counterintuitive when you're deciding to be an entrepreneur, because there's so much uncertainty, so much risk, so much downside if things go wrong. And if you look at statistics, things go wrong a heck of a lot of times in entrepreneurs' lives. And it's almost like, why would you do this? But I think if you don't have the foolishness of a child and and lose your inhibitions about the things that we hold so dear to, I genuinely think that most people will surprise themselves. And the last one, the popcorn that I regret giving up. Sure, that's such a long chapter. You've just got to read it. In that, I talk about a business called Pop It. So I'll be very brief. So I started a business called Pop It in 2011. I wanted to franchise a popcorn machine. Sounds stupid. I was going to buy a popcorn machine and brand it Pop It with a beautiful logo, and go get spices that Sterconico or New Metro uses, and I was going to put these popcorn machines everywhere in the country. So I went and bought one machine, and I put this at a friend's shop that was a cell phone shop in Malvern in the East Rand. And every day after work, I would go and collect, my 200 Rand for the day, 300 Rand per day, which I thought was pretty cool back then. But I started thinking like, man, but this doesn't scale. And I really believed that I had the best popcorn that the country had to offer. And I convinced my friend Floyd that he must buy into my franchise. And he bought a machine from me with the logo and the spices. And he put this out in his township in Guatemala, in Springs, at a taxi rank. And on his opening day, just putting the machine there, he made enough money to pay me back the whole machine. And I was just fascinated. I guess I got obsessed that maybe I do have the best popcorn. And within 2 months, we closed the franchise stuff. We partnered and we started actually producing popcorn. So we found sealers, packets. We made logos for the different flavors we had. And within a few months, we were in 27, I think we were probably in 30 garages. We were in 10 7-Elevens. We were in so many shops. It was an absolute mess. We both were doing articles. Floyd was the ops manager. He hired 5 guys that used to pop these popcorn and seal them in his grandmother's garage. And he would drive them to my house on his way to work at 4 o'clock in the morning. I would take all of these black, those refuse bags full of popcorn all the way to Soweto and Midrand at 4 o'clock in the morning so that I can still get to work. It really just grew up. It grew faster than us. We eventually bought a mini truck, all this doing articles, and we got to a point where we were doing 80, 100, 200K a month. And the businesses ran away with us. We started missing orders and we couldn't keep up. We bit off too much than we can chew, and we stopped. So I think the reason I regret it, I don't regret the lessons that we learned through that, but it was such a fascinating thing that we built in a period of 18 months during our busiest time in articles. And just the fact that we were these 22-year-olds, 23-year-olds who were able to, build this thing. At Deloitte, we started getting known as the Pop It guys, because every single client at Deloitte, they'd order popcorn from us. But it's a really beautiful story about a business that actually stopped because we were victims of our own success. We were writing art board exams, and so many people read that chapter and say, why don't you do it again? And if I had time, I would.
All right.
I see there's a question here. In your view, which business industries will grow post-COVID-19, and where do you think opportunities are for SMMEs in the near future? Okay. Lessons to teach your kids. Let me do the lessons to teach your kids. So I don't have kids yet, Tebs, and I don't have kids. It is in our plan sometime in the future. But right now I don't have kids. But when I think about what we would teach our kids, sorry, I just want to go to that chapter. We're almost there. Here we go. So, obviously there's a lot of things you must teach your kids, like how to walk. But I try to encapsulate the things that for me I've learned through business. And, the first thing that I want to teach my kids is the ability to sell. I cannot overemphasize how important a skill it is to be able to sell. And sometimes as entrepreneurs, we believe that that's someone else's job. You'll hire a sales team to do that. But it's just so important that you learn to sell. Like I joke with Tebs and I tell her that, when we have kids, I'm going to make the kids, have every single day at dinner, have a slideshow on why they deserve to eat. And the one with the best slideshow will get a nice juicy piece of chicken first, Obviously that's child abuse and I won't do that.
Yeah.
But that's just how important I think sales are. Like, when you're a boy and you see that girl in the club that you like, you are selling. When you're asking for your bonus appraisal, you're selling. When you're asking for your promotion, you are selling yourself. When you are proposing to your wife, you are selling. When you are convincing your parents, you're selling. What we don't see is that throughout a 24-hour period, we are always convincing someone, persuading, we're always selling. So the better you get at this, it's just a massive advantage you're going to have in life. So that's the first lesson. The second lesson is serving others. So at the core of what we do, we are not money driven, we are cause driven, and we really want to try solve unemployment and poverty cycles in South Africa. We couldn't hire enough people to champion that mission because for us, we really believe that to create sustainable lives and to give hope to the destitute and the hopeless, one way of doing this is essentially, creating employment. So that's quite an important thing for us. And the last thing is, just to be a good human being and just exhibit kindness all the time. And like I said, people do business with people they like. And so far it's working for us. And next question, where are businesses going to grow? Sure. I think, again, back to the boring, exciting. I think we've got to be careful not to jump on bandwagons and everyone buy a scooter tomorrow because they're going to become a delivery business. I think what you should be focusing on is to say, how do you create defensibility around your own business? Be it a technology defensibility against technology threats or pandemic threats. So you need to be looking at your business and say, how do I create a moat around this and how do I make it more future-proof, my business? So yes, you've got to be thinking about technology. You've got to be thinking about working differently. You've got to think that very few people are going to be comfortable going to the mall now and press that button that says, push here for button or push a lift. So, so things are definitely going to change and opportunities are going to change. But the only way that, you will realize opportunity is to imagine what the future looks like. So what are you going to be uncomfortable doing? And I'm pretty sure if you're uncomfortable doing, a lot of other people are going to have the same feeling. And how would you position your business to start thinking in that manner? And how do you position your product and service offering to address the needs of tomorrow? So most of the time we do business for today and we don't do business for, 5, 10, 15 years. And that's essentially how, in my mind, you start future-proofing this. Given that your business has grown over the years, besides right human capital that you have added, what would you also say has been the core winning recipe? Again, I'm going to sound like a broken telephone. We have an obsession with sales. We should probably even get help. We've got a WhatsApp group for sales. People every single day. I'm sure if I go on now in our WhatsApp group, someone has posted a Leonardo meme and they've got a sale. We're just growth entrepreneurs, and we really are. We always growth hacking and thinking of different ways of how to grow the business. And I'm sure we'll plateau at some point, but we will re-energize ourselves and challenge ourselves, and also obviously the right people. Okay. How do you strike the balance between constantly starting something new and focusing on the current business? That's actually a very good question. So I am typically a terrible person when it comes to focus, but where I'm incredibly lucky is that I have an incredible team of people around me. So Dylan, Tuto, Nathan, and Tebs are unbelievable entrepreneurs, and they are good at what they do. And they're ultra focused in the areas that they do. And I'm fascinated with starting stuff. But the older I get, I also recognize that the lines of water that I have in the water have to, truncate. So I also write about this in the book. It's called, Fish Where the Fish Are. So, when you start out entrepreneurship, you've got 100 lines in the water because you don't know where you're going to catch the fish. But the longer you stay at the river, you start realizing that, that spot over there brings me sardines, and that spot over there is giving me king clips. And essentially what you start doing is that you start having less and less of a focus on the things that don't bring you, growth. So I think this is a natural process for every entrepreneur. And I'm happy to say that today we probably have 3 focus areas. I want to be incredibly amazing at 3 things and not 300 things. So to that point, it's something that I've struggled with a lot. I love starting businesses, but I would much rather invest in a business today than start one, because I just know how incredibly difficult it is to get a business off the ground.
Okay, I'm just looking at time. We're booked till 12:30.
Sure.
If there aren't any more questions from our SMMs and other people that have joined in, maybe you can just do the parting words as a business person, obviously, and just giving practical advice that SMMEs may be, struggling to unpack, especially during this time.
Yeah, so thank you for again having me on the call, and I hope this was useful. I think the parting words really are just, consider your business model, consider its defensibility, and how would you change it to address, the new needs of the new economy, and also consider this lesson that I keep talking about. Boring is good. I learned that the human condition wants to build something fantastic as Facebook, and there's nothing wrong if that's your desire. And I wish you all the best with that. And we need more, South African heroes that will go do that. But for 98% of the economy, most people operate in a space of obscurity, and they do extremely well. And those are the guys that sell toothpicks to restaurant owners. If you go to a restaurant, you don't consider who sells the salt and shaker, salt and pepper shakers that you see on the table, the toothpick. But those businesses are massive businesses. Famous Brands owns a division that just makes those small, sugars that you have at your coffee shop. That business probably does 200 million a year, and you've never heard of it. And hence why I'm saying, for me, it's so important to know that there are business models that work. Look at your business model and how you would apply it in an economy to make sense of it. Sorry, thank you for the business advice, insightful. Can you access this video after? I'm sure you can. I think it is getting recorded. Yeah, so guys, as I said, I hope this was useful. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear about some of your guys' businesses and challenges. But from me, I hope this was useful, and yeah, awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Abed. On the person that's asking, yes, we will share the link straight after this in your email. So keep checking your emails. But thank you so much for your time. And we really hope that our SMMEs have taken some key points that they can be able to apply. And most importantly, the reason we are doing this as Enterprise Room, it is to assist as best as we can to our SMMEs to keep going, to keep their doors open. That's more important. And where they see that the strategies aren't working, just to tweak a little bit and change it so that it can work. But with that said, thank you so much for sharing those lessons. And I hope our SMMEs will engage with you going forward, and hope you open for coffee sessions and just maybe, I hope I'm not putting you into the sport, and just to give practical advice. I think we're very firm on that, to say we need to be as practical as possible without having to face a bigger giant and thinking that it can never be done. But thank you so much.
It's a massive pleasure. I've just left my email there if anyone wants to email, but I can't promise mentorship. I can't promise funding, but yeah, I'm happy to chat,
That's fine. I think an email is more than enough for them from time to time. I know you're very busy, but thank you so much for your time.
It's a massive pleasure, guys, and good luck. Chat soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.